Hi, this is Sadish86. I'm a longtime Battlefield Bad Company 2 player on the PlayStation 3, and this is my part 2 of my my videos on 10 things that Bad Company 2 did well, and it's also second part on me just ranting about where I think Battlefield is currently going wrong and how I think it could be improved. In the first video, I talked about the three things I think Bad Company 2 did not do well, which is the ability to enter your opponent's spawn, which led to spawn killing, the ungenerous flag capture system, which only gave you points if you finish capturing a flag, and I talked about um, how the community within the game ultimately got narrowed down to infantry only maps, or started to prefer that and then isolate itself from the full experience of the game. So the first video, I went over those three things, and then the first five positives about the game were Bad Company 2's customization and customization menu, uh, its classic perk system, its progression system, map Easter eggs, and its leaderboards. But in this video, I'm going to get into, I think, the real meatiness, the real meat of Bad Company 2's we'll say glory. Okay, so number 5, I have the snap-on knife. So the knife in Bad Company 2 had a target snap-on effect that allowed for essentially long-range knifing. Just think of Call of Duty Black Ops knife. The max range for the snap-on effect of a stationary target is about 6 feet away. That means if you are within 6 feet of a stationary target who you are looking at directly, and you press the knife button when he is within that 6 feet range, you will connect with him no matter how far he moves away from you, vertically or horizontally. This means you can lunge a knife, like in Call of Duty Black Ops, and also perform a ladder climb knife. So think of, so let's say you're on the floor, and a player is 6 to maybe 10 feet up a ladder, and then you jump from the floor in order to get yourself closer to him, and then press the knife button. If the player on the ladder is close enough to you when you jump and press the button, if he's within that snap-on range, that snap-on effect will carry you up the ladder with him as far as he is by the time the animation finishes. So basically, you can jump 20 feet from the floor up a ladder to perform a knife. So, which obviously that is a very broken mechanic, but it makes the knife more useful and fun. And so another way in which you could use a knife was that you can knife people through walls. And the way you could do this is if the target was visible through a door, a window, or any opening when you press the knife button. If that target moves behind a wall, your knife will successfully land on him. Like you will knife a wall, but it will register a kill on the target who you focused on when you began the knife. And another cool feature about the knife was that it had priority over bullets if you initiated a lunge before the target starts shooting at you. So basically, if let's say you are facing a character who is looking sideways, and you begin to lunge at him. If he's able to turn around and even shoot directly at you with any weapon, if you had pressed the knife button and began the animation and mechanic before he started shooting you, his bullets will just go right through you, and you will be able to prioritize his bullets with your knife. So this made the knife in Bad Company 2 extremely useful, it's extremely fun, and then it wasn't just an ammo conservation tool, and it was always a one-hit kill, which is a lot more. It makes it a lot more pragmatic and useful than the modern battlefield knife, which isn't always a one-hit kill, and sometimes requires 3 to 4 hits, which really is just asking people to not use the knife. It's really like why implement something if you aren't intending it to be useful? That's why Fortnite gets rid of guns that no one uses in its game and replaces it with ones that are more useful. So that's one area that Back 2 did well. It made sure it had a knife that was completely outlandish, useful, and fun. And one side benefit of this is that uh, it led to a entire subcommunity within the Back 2 community who were dedicated to just knifing. So what I mean is many players spent time using only the knife, learning about its range and hitboxes. This led to an influx of one-on-one knife rooms where players would face each other with only the knife, and they had teammates who would revive them to speed up the knifing process. This was so popular and fun that many top players spent time doing it, and some names who you might know if you play the game are Gujax, Wicked Ranger, Shorty King, Skullmasher, and FBI Abozade, and there's many more. And also, it's probably likely that literally every Bad Company 2 player who has literally touched the controller while playing that game, they have probably participated in some form of a knife-only room in some form or another, whether it's one-on-one knifing or it's an entire room that conforms to just that everybody, once everybody figures out that people are knifing, they conform to also only knifing, and then the entire room is just people knifing and reviving each other. And that was considered to be the most fun thing in the game for years and years and years. And this is something that modern games just don't have because they're trying to be too real, cool, and mature, and they don't want to have anything broken. As opposed to they would rather have a mature image and serious image than have fun features that are broken, which really is just a way of saying you want to neuter a game just so you can say it's balanced, which doesn't justify playing, because if it's not fun, it doesn't matter how balanced it is. It just means that it's boring but agreeable. So the knife was essentially an arena shooter type mechanic and allowed the game to be more outlandish and fun. And because of its completely not completely, but because its hitbox and range were essentially abstract forces in the game, the fact people spent time knifing just so they can learn about its hitboxes and range, which is essentially its own skill gap. So this was a sub goal players could achieve in game. And I know that Call of Duty Black Ops had this feature, and so must be just one of those classic features. Like I had number 9 in my first video was the classic perk system where you had like the body armor, the stopping power, you had extra ammo, things that prominent perks that impact the game very significantly, as opposed to just perks that are there to say that they're there, but I don't want to be too impactful. That this is real, like all these modern trends of trying to be focusing on balance over fun is just really leading to shallow, stale, repetitive gameplay that I personally am not looking for. And it's pretty obvious if you know that like the most popular games, Fortnite, Overwatch, at least those two games, which really aren't that serious looking, or their games have very overpowered mechanics that are meant to make playing the game more fun because of what they allow you to do. Battlefield is unfortunately going the wrong direction in that regard. It's trying to be the most serious, mature, and wants to be perceived as being like warlike and immersive, have like an intense feel to it. But really, those things don't really come into play when the mechanics that are allowed in the game are as boring as proning or hip firing. If that's all you can do in a game, that's you've already done that in so many other games that I don't know why you think. Well, I don't know why anyone would find that to be fun unless they're new to the genre and haven't played something better yet. So all this ranting to say that the knifing mechanic, the knife in Beckham 2, was extremely game breaking and contributed to the long playability of the game and just made the game more fun. Number 4, I had the movement system of Beckham 2. First things first, Beckham 2 did not have a prone, which might be a detractor compared to modern battlefields. But one really good thing it didn't have in my book is the vault is auto movements like vaulting and momentum, door opening, and window jumping. So this means that everybody is forced into a situation in which they are able to control their character at all times, which in my book is ideal. And another reason why this is the case in Beckham 2 is because the movement was in general slower, meaning in order to move fast enough to be compared to modern battlefields, you had to use the lightweight kit. Otherwise, you just move slower. So what is the benefit of that? The benefit is because it was slow enough that it allowed you to control your character and perform what I guess you could call advanced techniques. For instance, in modern battlefields, the movement is quicker and snappier or jerkier, I'd say, not just because of the auto movements that I mentioned, but because your jump is less vertical and it's horizontally longer. So that doesn't allow you. So that's not really allowing you to jump and then shoot in midair, because midair is so short because the jump is not high. It's now horizontally longer. You're jumping in modern battlefields are more of like a lunge jump, whereas Bad Company 2's initial jump is more like a bunny hop. A bunny hop with fatigue. I personally found the movement in Battlefield Bad Company 2 to give the player more options, because the movement was slow enough to allow advanced techniques, which is also due to the gunplay, which I'll get to later. So that's just my reason why Bad Company 2 was its movement was better than modern movement, because it was slower and was controllable enough to allow you to do things like jump shooting, which you really can't do in any non-arena shooter anymore. So the movement Bad Company 2 allowed for advanced techniques to happen and allowed you to have more control, because instead of being vaulted through a door or through a window or being accidentally vaulted over a wall, you just jump at a wall, or you can jump inside a window, or you can not accidentally open a door because you press the square button. Like on PlayStation 4 or Battlefield 5, you can open a door by accident because if you're close enough to a door and you hold on to the square button while you're in range of the door opening range, you'll open the door and give yourself away, which I think is I don't know. I just find that being able to control your character and be responsible for your results more is what I prefer, and I think slower movement and less snap-on, less auto movements, I think is better. Now, maybe including prone again is something that would improve Bad Company 2, but very obviously we don't have prone. The gameplay is much more run and gun because there's no prone camping, just to lower your profile and to increase your gun control. Everybody is there's more freedom of movement, which I think most players would prefer that because it allows being able to multitask because you can control yourself more even while you're including actions inside that movement. I think players would rather have that control. So number 4, I have the movement. Number 3, I have the lack of realism. And what I'm talking about is first, the gun recoil was minimal. So the guns were very overpowered because you weren't really restricted with any movements, and the recoil was so minimal that you can kill people with any gun at almost any range, like at least in regards to automatic firing weapons. And the other big thing about the unrealism of Back 2 was its kit swapping ability, which was instant. Obviously, in real life, you can't drop your own weapons and gadgets and then pick up someone else's full kit and weapons in less than a second. Obviously, in real life, that takes time. In Bad Company 2, you could do this instantly, which essentially allowed people to be super soldiers, meaning you could you could you could acquire a lightweight perk that you didn't have and combine it with your 4 times scope, or you could start off with a lightweight kit and then access a 4 times scope by picking up someone else's kit who had that. Um, and you could just, I say a super soldier because you can continue lives through unrealistic ways, such as if you are running inside a building to escape somebody who's shooting at you while you have to reload your gun to even defend yourself. If you happen to run over a dead body and you see the icon, you can you can swap your situation out for whatever situation that person's gun and gadgets were in, and that could lead to extended firepower capabilities because you're not you're not subjected to um, just the normal uh, firing rate and frequency of a gun that has to reload. You can you can fire one gun, unload all your magazines out of both primary and secondary, and you can pick up a gun that has most of its bullets and continue that way. And that animation is faster than reloading, much faster. So, because of this reason, because of my experience of playing Bad Company 2 in arena shooters, and then playing modern Battlefield games, which uh, lack um, game-breaking mechanics in general, I would say. Like, I mean, there's vehicles which obviously make the game different than the average shooter. But in terms of the infantry player and what he can do, I find it's not quite as good as Bad Company 2's individual player empowerment, just because of, as I said before, it's a movement system which allowed you to perform jump shooting, which is not realistic, but it's very arcadey and arena-like, and it really it allows you to overcome situations that you can't in more normal shooting games. So I, in general, am a fan of realism. In fact, I would say that a game with many strong options and techniques, even if they're broken, that game is more likely to be played and enjoyed long term than a game that is better balanced but lacks meaningful decision making options. And in my book, realism is always going to be the more constraining and limiting theme over unrealism, and is more likely to not allow accidental fun to happen because the line between what's doable and what's not is trying to not be crossed. In unrealism, it's all about your imagination. Now, I guess I should probably say this point: is unrealism doable in a Battlefield game? My stance is that any video game that's not deliberately trying to be a simulated experience shouldn't even begin to cross the realism line. Why force yourself into any box? Regardless of how many Battlefield players say that if you make a game more like something else, it isn't quote unquote Battlefield, it doesn't change the fact that doing just the same things over and over again will eventually get boring. No matter how real and serious a game looks and makes you want it, it's what you can do that determines how long you will keep playing it. And I guess I maybe I'll beat Battlefield 5 while it's down by saying that unrealistic games are more popular right now than games that try to be realistic. Battlefield 5 is trying to be half serious shooter, half serious military sim shooter, half casual shooter. That's obviously not a good formula right now. The games are popular, Rainbow Six Siege, obviously Fortnite, and Overwatch. Those games, well, I guess Rainbow Six Siege has some realistic factors that I think help it, but its destruction gives it in-game decision-making options, which Battlefield 5 just doesn't have, or is not as good as. So my point here would be is that if Battlefield wants to only appeal to the most dedicated Battlefield players, it won't make a lot of money because most gamers don't care about the Battlefield image like the Battlefield veterans do. Unrealism is, in my opinion, more in line with a fundamental video game concept of exploration and experimentation, and is easier to implement game-breaking features into a game. Let me say that. And it is easier to implement game-breaking features into a game that doesn't care about realism than one that does, since whatever cool feature being thought of might be cast aside because it doesn't fit in with the image of that serious game. In my opinion, that's the classic example of style over substance, which most popular games don't limit themselves to. If Battlefield wants to be both a Battlefield game and a game with broader appeal, I think it'll make its life easier by going the route of unrealism. Um, and to bring this back in to Bad Company 2, Bad Company 2 was a very arcadey and sandboxy game while still looking like a Battlefield game, meaning if you watch what happens, like you see military type soldier characters, and you have vehicles and you have the explosions and the destruction, it looks like a Battlefield game. However, the game's unrealism was still maintained without having to exchange the appeal. It changes the image. Back up to it looks like a serious shooter, but it plays like a sandboxy game with overpowered guns. So, in my opinion, to finish off this topic on unrealism, re-implementing the outlandish features of Bad Company 2 into another Battlefield game would improve the sandbox feel and decision making of the game. And if not Bad Company 2, maybe something like Battlefield Heroes is also a great idea. Because that game plays like Battlefield but looks like Fortnite. So maybe taking that other end of the spectrum will help Battlefield's cause. So that's number 3, the unrealism of Bad Company 2. Number 2, I have the destruction. The destruction in Bad Company 2 was obviously game breaking at the time, because at the time there weren't any competitive shooting games on the market or the main market that actually allowed players to blow a hole in a wall, make unnatural traveling routes, and not have to face a good camper only on his terms. You could blow one of his walls up and force him out with a grenade, or shoot a rocket at a windowed wall and shoot around the destroyed wall with your primary instantly. Battlefield 5's destruction is comparable to Bad Company 2. That's probably the main thing I think it does really well, while many of the other Battlefields have a very narrow destruction that doesn't introduce any new tactics to most players in most situations. And in my opinion, that is sad. If a game could have game-breaking destruction in 2010, it should only get better as you go along and more technology becomes available, right? No. Now, at this point, I don't know anything about game design, but I find it hard to believe that removing destruction just to make room for more players or better graphics, that's not a good exchange. That's removing the game depth just to allow more people to play, which is probably better from a financial standpoint because it allows more people to play in one server, which might be easier for the DICE side. But from a consumer product standpoint, that's a really bad exchange to remove something as sandboxy as destruction which promotes the idea that you and your decisions matter, or that you can dictate reality in a way that a game without a sandbox feel doesn't allow. To remove that aspect of a game, or to remove most of it, just to allow more people to be inside a server. Like, what's the point of having more people in a server if you're not allowing them? How is that an upgrade if you're not allowing them to do the same things that a smaller server game has? I consider the sandbox nature of Bad Company 2's Destruction to be like it's not as good, but it has the same category of appeal that the building feature in Fortnite has. It's your ability to alter reality and to not be limited to the usual gameplay tactics. Like, obviously, you can flank in Fortnite, you can flank in Bad Company 2, but in those games you can build it. In Bad Company 2 you can destroy things, and in Fortnite you can build and destroy things. Um, so I think the destruction gives a completely sandboxy feel to the game, and I think sandboxiness is what a lot of gamers are looking for. Um, like, I'm not saying that players can't enjoy games that are not sandboxy. Like, a lot of people play, sports games, they enjoy those. But if you think about Fortnite's appeal, like, it's obviously due to its sandbox feel to it, um, where players can play a competitive game where they have large amounts of control over their situation. Because more options and more control equals better. The destruction of Bad Company 2, I think it might actually be second best to Battlefield 5. Um, some parts are some parts of some buildings Battlefield 5 are more destructible than Bad Company 2, and that's a great thing. Um, but because I'm talking about Bad Company 2 right now, I'm focusing on its destruction. So I would say that its destruction is or maybe I should go back to say Battlefield 5's destruction is probably a good direction for the series, and it's very much like Bad Company 2, so I'm supportive of that. Number one, I have the glue that made everything else work in the game, the gunplay. Uh, Bad Company 2's gunplay had low recoil, and all guns had one firing mode, and damage output on most of the guns didn't vary by range, the exceptions being the snipers, the bolt action snipers, and the shotguns. For instance, SMG could kill someone at very long range if you tap fired. The same goes for all the other automatic firing weapons. This isn't to say that all guns are as good at killing at all ranges as each other, but that if you chose a gun meant for close range like an SMG, you still had a solid chance to kill people outside your range if you had practiced tap firing. This made gunplay incredibly simple and effective in Bad Company 2, and this, combined with slower movement, allowed for unrealistic but skilled shooting techniques that are utterly developed out of existence in most modern shooters. The simpler the shooting is, the easier it is for a player to do more things at once. That is part of why, again, Fortnite and Overwatch are so popular. In those games, you don't have to stop moving in order to have good aim. And because you can do that, you can move around more and perform advanced techniques quickly in order to help yourself. In realism, you move very little and are at the mercy of tactics more, as opposed to tactics and techniques. As I said before, in most modern shooters, the only advanced technique that players can actually execute is strafe shooting, 80-80 spam. And since many players complain about that, it gets nerfed and we're left with even less to do. Yes, flanking, camping, and proning are all viable tactics, but why settle for those three when you can still have those three plus whatever advanced techniques Unrealism allows? Bad Company 2 shooting was easy, but still allowed for a very high skill gap due to low movement penalty, which allowed for advanced techniques to happen. That is a better model than very realistic and neutered gun performance, where it becomes rock, paper, scissors, which is another way of saying you are designed to be helpless in certain situations. In my opinion, that's really just shallow game design. And while it's, here we go again, more realistic, it doesn't in my opinion, it makes the game less appealing because I would like to be able to I'd rather be able to have a chance at a situation as opposed to be stuck at the fate of narrowed game design just because it's more realistic and some people think they want realism. That's like, removing a feature out of any game is limiting its potential. And while some people think that if you make Battlefield less realistic, it's not Battlefield, very clearly the fact that Battlefield's popularity is at least pretty low with Battlefield 5, I think that's a real sign that most gamers don't actually care about realism, and they just want a fun game where you can control things and try to use that control in a competitive situation to outperform people with those options. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much my point on the Battlefield on Bad Company 2's gunplay is that the guns were essentially arena shooter guns, and the guns were so strong that every every player essentially was able to fend for himself in every situation and was able to even take out people outside their intended ranges, which I don't complain about. I think of that as a skill potential that I can achieve and enjoy. So that's pretty much That's pretty much my top 10 on Bad Company 2. And essentially, my conclusion is Battlefield is not in a good spot right now, despite having more accessible and sandboxy titles already to its name that they could retry. No game is above being sandboxy and explorational. There's no image that will ever sway a person more than a plethora of in-game choices or the ability to influence their environment in a way that improves their situation. Right now, I think that the developers of Battlefield are focused on making Battlefield look like a great game, vehicle play, destruction, explosions, yada yada, but they aren't creating games with fun interactions between characters and the in-game environment. Games that do that one thing always appeal to a lot of people. So final conclusion is Battlefield will do itself a favor by stop trying to manipulate its image and discarding that serious, mature, and realistic image it thinks it needs. Gamers aren't stupid and know a shell game when they try it. Battlefield needs to retry a Battlefield Bad Company 2 type game and or a Battlefield Heroes type game. The mainline Battlefield experience has been rehashed to death. Okay, that's all I got. And if someone actually watches this, please feel free to like, dislike, respond however you think. Sorry for the rambling. If you're able to stick through it, thanks. Just hope if you're a fan of Bad Company 2 or you're bored with Battlefield 5 and agree with me, please share this video with anyone. Obviously, it's not a money-making video, so you're not contributing towards my money-making scheme. This is just a fanfare promotion video. Thanks.